So here's the information. And you might be thinking, okay, what's the point of all of this? You just told us about the New Age movement. You described kind of just the nuts and bolts of it to us. We can go way further down the rabbit hole, but I'm trying to keep everything superficial for the sake of time. But what's the point? Well, this is the point. This is why you're here. This is why I'm here. This is the heart of the matter. The only thing that really matters on this chart that I really want you to care about is the first two parts. And that is the fact that 6 in 10 Americans, just any American across the entire country, from California to New York, 6 in 10 Americans, whether they are religious or not, believe in at least one New Age belief, whether that's psychics, reincarnation, astrology, tarot, belief that energy, spiritual energy can exist in crystals and things. The other stat to that is not just 6 in 10 Americans believe that, 6 in 10 people in the church believe that. 60% of Christians across our country believe that. Every other piece of information is just the breakdown of that main stat. So Protestants, evangelicals, Catholics, etc., in America, the percentage is almost exactly the same. 62 to 61% believe in at least one New Age belief. At least one. That is astounding. And if you ask the question, well, why? Well, this same poll later on revealed only about 10% of people who profess Christianity as their main practice read their Bible on a daily basis. The other 90% don't, of confessing Christians. So, think there's a correlation between biblical ignorance and this belief in this stat? Absolutely there is. And it gets worse. The only thing you really need to pay full attention to up here is the red and the blue, the light blue. The red is 2021, the light blue is 2023, so last year. And what this is Gen Z. So right now, basically all teenagers, 7th grade and older, are Gen Z. If you have kids who are 6th grade and younger, they are Gen Alpha. So basically people in their teens and 20s are Gen Z, 30s, 40s, etc., are millennials, and etc. But here's the point. Right after COVID in 2021, 16% of Gen Z said that they were practicing Christian. And this Pew definition of practicing Christian is you go to church at least once a month, whether in person or online, and you say that faith is important to you. That is their low bar of practicing Christian. So Gen Z, practicing Christian, 16%. In 2023, just last year, it was 13%. Non-practicing Christian, your Creasters, people who go to church on Christmas and Easter, or they don't go at all. For Gen Z, that was 48%. So they say they're a Christian, but they're Christian because they believe in God. That's usually that definition. It went from 48 to 41% in those same 3 years. People who are not Christian, however, went up in the Gen Z age range. It went from 36 to 46% in the last 3 years. I didn't say they were atheists. I didn't say they were agnostic. They could be anything spiritually, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. No religious affiliation whatsoever, but they're spiritual in their new age. That is going up. The other interesting stat that I forgot to put in here, but there's been a flip. Throughout all of pretty much American history, it's always been, in terms of people who leave the church, it's always been men who've been the majority. Gen Z is the first generation in American history where actually women are leaving the church at a faster rate than men. It's about 55% right now. The good news in that, though, is the men who are staying in the church are more hungry and more gung-ho for God than ever before. And that is cool, because when the father gets saved, typically the entire family gets saved shortly after. When mom gets saved, it can pretty much be a mixed bag of who and who will not get saved. But when dad is a Christian, typically the rest of the family becomes Christian shortly thereafter. So that's an encouraging thing in the midst of some things that are not so encouraging. Again, as far as when this breaks down, everything in light blue and dark blue is basically 12 and under. Light blue is teenage years. Yellow, tan is in their 20s, and dark yellow is in their 30s or older. So the one on the left side, right here, would be Gen Z. Millennials, people in their 30s and 40s, are the second one. Gen X is people in their 50s, 60s. They're right there. And then on the far end are our baby boomers, basically people 65 and older. And if you look just very simply from where we are on Gen Z to the other side, you'll see that most of the people, Gen Z, when they leave the church, it happens before they are 18 years old. Whereas baby boomers, most of them, when they left the church, it was in their adult years. And Gen X and millennials, it kind of breaks down kind of evenly between each age group. It's a very fascinating study. However, this is important. Young people aren't becoming atheists. They are replacing God and the church for spirituality, Wicca, and the New Age, most of them. And the question then becomes, well, why? Why are they doing this, right? Gen Z, swapping traditional faith for magic spells. Even the Catholics are having this problem. Gen Z is swapping traditional Catholic faith, and they're bringing in tarot, and they're bringing in other New Age, and they're mixing it together with their Catholicism. Other Christian things, right? Even the secular news. NBC News did an article on this a few years ago about how fast the New Age movement is growing among Gen Z, right? The witchcraft and all that's great. Now, given that this article this is happening in Salem, Massachusetts, okay, the witch population is going up in Salem, so I'll grant you that. For those of you who get the joke there, good for you. But it's happening everywhere around the country too. It's not just unique to one small little Massachusetts town. And the question is why? Why is Gen Z so attracted to this? Right? And ultimately, it's really easy when you think about it. Gen Z and children and young people in general are powerless. Think of how many people in their 20s, like, I can't find a house right now. How many people still live with their parents? How many people are just starting off in their career, so they have no financial power. They have no job power. They have no power in general because maybe they're just kids and living with their parents. But this offers them power. This offers them freedom. Again, they can believe whatever they want. There are no rules. And this is very, very appealing. And when you think about it, at a deeper level, humans are inherently materialistic and selfish. That's incredibly obvious. I don't have to tell you that. Everyone in here is selfish. The only difference is, compared to us and little kids, many of you in here are just better at hiding it. Amen. They might throw a tantrum when they don't get what they want. You do too. But because you don't want to be embarrassed in front of your peers and others, you hold it in until you get to the car. Then on the way home, you have your moment. But think about this. Gen Z and millennials, as far as material stuff, and you baby boomers in here, you know this. Think of what you had when you were a kid, and think of all the stuff that your grandkids have now. This generation of kids has more stuff than any generation of humans who have ever lived on planet Earth, period. And yet, my generation, millennials, and their generation, Gen Z and younger, they are the most empty generation, the most hungry generation, completely unsatisfied. They have more stuff than anyone, and yet they are more hungry, more spiritually bankrupt than any generation that has ever lived. All of you have one of these on you somewhere. You are more connected than any generation of humans who ever lived. I can call up Japan, I can call up China, I can call up South Africa, England, whoever. I have a friend in some other country, I can call them up in 3 seconds. We are more connected than we have ever been. We have all this social media, and yet most young people don't even know how to socialize. We are so connected, and yet we have never been so lonely. We have more stuff, and yet we have never been so empty. Why? That's a conversation for another day, perhaps. But do you think it's going to be easier for Gen Alpha, those people who are in 6th grade and younger, or is it going to be harder? Are they going to be better, or are they going to be worse? This is where the New Age movement comes in, because they step in and they say, hey, we can fill that spiritual emptiness while making no demands for a physical or moral change. You don't have to pick up your cross and follow me. You don't have to deny yourself. You don't have to stop doing this or that. You can still continue to be as sinful and selfish as you want to be while still allegedly having, your spiritual needs and hunger met. But it's like spiritual Chinese food. It'll fill you up and you'll get full from your big buffet, but what happens an hour later? You're hungry again, right? You've all been there. You know what I'm talking about. That's what this comes down to, right? Makes no demand for a change, will satisfy, or at least claiming to satisfy that hunger. And at the same time, it tries to offer answers to the questions they may have about material things, about spiritual things. Wrong answers, but answers that the church has been pretty silent and pretty, honestly, crappy about answering in the last 20, 30 years. Whether that's about evil and suffering, no one wants to talk about hell, God forbid we do that. Gender roles, sexuality, spiritual phenomenon, occult beliefs, UFOs. God forbid we talk about those. People think we're weird.